So here's our first concrete of why generics. So there's a couple things that pop up here before we get to the solution. Number one is that if we created a Java collection of linked lists and we wanted to add an item, a very simple capital integer into our linked list, that's just fine. But the bad part is that we would need to constantly basically say, hey, if I want to iterate through this and do the dot next and return an integer, we got to say that, hey, wait a minute, I got to cast the sucker just like we do down here in order to make sure that this next actually returns an integer with a capital I back to us. That's some extra work, and that's extra things behind the scenes that frankly we don't want to do, because the type safe polymorphic is the important part. We want the generics with collections to be able to use iterator.next and automatically know, oh, okay, I'm going to pull an integer from this list. I'm going to pull an animal from this list. We want Java to do the darn work, not us. Because right now, from what we know, is that we would have to cast everything to let us know that, hey, I'm supposed to pull an integer from this in order to get this here. But what if I screw up and put a string instead? Then we're going to have an error, but it's going to bad cast error, and we're going to have errors that pop up because, we make mistakes. We want Java to really kind of basically say, okay, they created an integer list of this. Every time we do a get or some other function, it knows polymorphically that we are able to pull integers out of that list because it has the information that it really needs, but we need to do that all together. So there's no casting when we get into generics, and that's the beautiful part of it, because again, Java knows that we're going to use an integer for this particular list. So if we're going to add a new integer, can't get away from that part. But with the iterator or any other functions that are associated with our overall setup of our data structure, Java is going to be able to do it because it's using the type safe polymorphic. It's going to go through and say, oh, wait a minute, iterator.next, okay, it belongs to L. L was, it was an iterator. So it goes back and kind of feeds back to see what data type that we're using. Now, let's say we still made a mistake. This time it'd be a compile error instead of the bad exception error. That's a big difference between the two here. One, Java would let this go by, and then we'd pick it up during runtime, which is a problem. Here, now using generics, it says, wait a minute, L is an integer and you're trying to pull a string from that? It knows, and that's what's more powerful to us to stop it before it gets even worse, especially during runtime. So that's the power that we're going to be able to use with generics, because we are telling Java, hey, we're using an integer, and Java is going to remember that from the type safe polymorphism, and able to help us with the rest of coding that we don't need to do, like conversions and casting. So that's the first big step when it comes to using generics.